Alright, so if we're going to solve the equation 2 cosine squared x plus cosine x equals 0 to the parameters of 0 and 2 pi, first off what we do is we would start by setting up the formula right here. And as you can tell, because it's squared x and then x, it's set up as if it was a quadratic. So we can say this is set it up as 2x to the power of 2 and 1x. So if you factor it, the factors would become x would be equal to 1 over 2 and 0. But because we're dealing with cosine, in factored form, it would look at like 2 cosine plus 1 and cosine x. So if we have these two x values, we're going to have to look where it happens on the graph. So first off, if we look at cosine 0, we know that we can use the cast rule, and so that we know that the points on the cast rule are cosine x and x equals 0. And sine x. So if we have x equals 0, that is your x value. So we want to find on this plane where x is equal to 0. So x is equal to 0 up here and down here. So x is equal to 0 at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And then when we look at cosine x equals negative 1 over 2, we know that it can't be in quadrant 4 and quadrant 1, because that is when cosine is positive. So we know it has to be in these two quadrants. And we know that cosine x is equal to pi over 2 at pi over 3, because it would be equal to cosine 60. So if we know that it's cosine 60, so that would be pi over 3. We know that it has to be in the second and third quadrant. We find out what pi over 3, what the equivalent is in those quadrants. So in the second quadrant, the equivalent is 2 pi over 3, and in the in the third quadrant is pi over 4 over 3. We know that because this is pi over 2, and this is just greater than pi over 2, and this is in the third quadrant, and it is just greater than pi, for pi over 3 is greater than pi. And so our final solution is that it is equal to, the final solutions are 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2.